Welcome to the WHG TechTALK podcast. We're going to be talking about getting more from the tech that you already have. This is actually our first episode, and we're recording here in our WHG offices, so it's very special to have you on board. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, thank you. Congratulations on your first podcast.
It's so exciting. So I'm looking forward to today's conversation because we're taking a bit of a different approach. There's been a lot of conversation in industry over the last months, years about the upcoming changes to the National Heavy Vehicle Laws.
The Heavy Vehicle National Law.
Heavy Vehicle National Law.
I need it over there. The Heavy Vehicle National Laws upcoming. A lot of operators are getting ready. And so today it's not really about the how-to with the compliance. Today's really going to be something a bit more practical about how we can make the fleet compliance easier. How do we get more value from the technology that operators already have? And how are the regulators, technology providers, and industry working together to make fleets safer, smarter, and better connected? Today we've brought together three people who bring a unique perspective each to the conversation, so let's meet them. So firstly, our first guest probably spends more time thinking about fatigue than most of us do sleeping. Welcome, Matt Boland from the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator.
Thank you. Hello.
Hey. So Matt, tell us a little bit about yourself and the NHVR.
Yeah, so as you said, my name's Matt Boland. I'm the Manager for Fatigue and Human Factors at the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator. I've been there 2.5 years now, and my remit is effectively looking at anything related to Chapter 6 of the HVNL or things that are impacted by that. My background, though, is a bit different. I haven't always worked in trucks. I've been around the traps in different high-risk transport industries. I've done military, aviation, rail, roads, maritime, even a short stint in financial crime. But now I am here with the Heavy Vehicle Regulator doing all things fatigue and human factors.
Great. And that's a breadth of experience to bring to the role.
Thank you.
Great. Our next guest is one of those rare people who can make policy, standards and certifications sound very enticing, helped, of course, by a voice that's smoother than a freshly sealed highway. I'd like to welcome Gavin Hill, General Manager of Strategic Engagement and Performance at Austroads. Welcome, Gavin.
Right. Thank you, Lucinda. Thanks for having us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and the Austroads and TCA.
Yeah, for those who aren't familiar, Austroads is the collective of all Australian and New Zealand transport agencies. Within Austroads, there's a business area called Transport Certification Australia, and it has a very specific role around technology and the certification of technology for the use in road transport for regulatory purposes. Matt mentioned Chapter 6. When it comes to Transport Certification Australia, we live and breathe Chapter 7 of the Heavy Vehicle National Law. So WHG is one of the technology providers who has been certified by TCA, which means that their technologies have been independently assessed and recognised for use in government programs.
Fantastic. I'm enthralled to find out more about Chapter 6, Chapter 7 and what the next chapter is. Thanks, Gavin. And finally, representing WHG, we've got Dylan Hartley. Dylan is our Chief Executive Officer, and if connected technology had a translator, I would have to say it would have to be you, Dylan. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Lucinda. Definitely try my best to help, simplify the messaging around technology, but it's a very exciting space, and been involved in it now for over, say, close on 25 years, and it's just so exciting to see the growth and the direction of where we're all heading, and the level of engagement across the industry is super exciting.
Great space to be in. So this podcast today, we're going to focus on 4 different sections. We're going to focus, the first part will be what's happened in the past and the development of where technology has come in this space. The second part will be based around the present and the current state of affairs. And the third and the fourth part is around the future and what's coming next, which is often the exciting part of these conversations. All right. So before we get into today's conversation, let's pull into a quick pit stop. So we're just going to ask a couple of little warm-up icebreaker questions.
Excellent.
So I'm going to start with you, Matt. Night owl or sunrise?
I think I've actually transitioned from one to the other. So I used to be more of a night owl, and then I decided to have a child who likes to wake up super early, and I've kind of been forced to be a morning person now because of that. So
There we go. Thank you.
I'm just going through that myself, so can relate.
Yeah. Excellent. Gavin,
Mm.
I'm going to ask you a question, and
Yes.
you can't say both.
Okay.
So the question is rules or innovation?
I'm a big believer in innovation. My background in economics has influenced me with that response. However, you still do need some rules. So innovation within a regulated setting,
Yep.
I think, is the best combination. So I've answered yes to both, but I think to drive economic progress and societal progress and technological progress, absolutely innovation is absolutely key.
Yeah, they do go hand in hand, don't they? Yes. Now, Dylan, build it or buy it?
I think build it. We as a business, I think the best part is being involved in the innovation, but at the same time, being very realistic. You can get so distracted by the future and what's coming, but build the solutions that people need today.
Yeah. Excellent. And one for all of you. So if you could invent one piece of technology that would make life easier for truck drivers tomorrow, what would it be? I'll start with you, Gavin.
Good question. I don't know whether I'm going to answer this question directly, but I think we have a long way to go to improving the amenity for drivers. So when we talk about fatigue and rest areas and facilities management, I'd like to wave a magic wand and improve the amenities that we offer heavy vehicle drivers, particularly for women, and to encourage a greater diversity into the industry. But to answer your question more directly, perhaps having technology that can inform the drivers of the availability of rest areas on major routes and perhaps non-major routes as well, and being able to feed that back into the cab so that drivers have a better chance of managing their fatigue effectively based on the availability of real estate.
Great answer. Very practical. All right. So, Matt?
I actually really like that answer because that's one of the things we get asked a lot from truck drivers is, I've pulled up to this rest stop. There's no space to actually stop. I'm going to breach if I keep driving. What do I do? So I think having that information more readily available would actually solve a lot of those problems. So getting people the quality of rest they need, not just pulling up and trying to squeeze in somewhere and potentially waking other people up in the process kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think having that interconnected system with live data would certainly help a lot.
And I think,
So I'll just steal Gavin's answer basically.
yeah. Well, I'm kind of foreseeing that Dylan's response might be an answer to that question.
Well, I'll show you some stuff on the way out. No, I think my answer is possibly, in the same field, but the other part of it is in our industry, we've got the best people, and so many people have built amazing careers on transport, but it's not a career that naturally someone might select. And I think somehow try and encourage young people to want to participate in our industry and attract talent and actually showcase what we do, because I think a lot of people don't understand the work that goes into just getting a product from a warehouse to a shelf and the elegance in it. There's a real there's a dance of skills that happens quietly in the background, right from physically managing the steering wheel to writing the policy and the enforcement that goes behind it. So somehow, wave a wand and showcase what we do to attract more engagement,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we've got the right people in the room today. I'm quite excited. It's not often that you get this mix of, from across industry in a room. So thank you all for joining and
Pleasure.
looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah.
Me too.
So part one of our section is around the compliance changes and how technology has changed as well. So we're going to have a look at how it's evolved over the last 5 years or so. So I might start with you, Matt. With the upcoming reforms to the national laws and the electronic work diaries, what's the biggest impacts for operators right now and how are they managing the compliance?
I think one of the biggest changes we're looking at with these round of changes with the law is actually not talking just about compliance, but looking at actually actively managing the risk associated with your activities. So the new safety management system standards that have come out are now not necessarily compliance focused, but they're actually looking at how effective your systems are in managing risk. And I think tying that back in with technology, I'm sure we'll talk about it more as we go, but that's one area where perhaps the previous regime didn't necessarily embrace that as much, but now that we're looking more at how well you're performing rather than how compliant you are, I think there's a lot more opportunity to integrate technology in that answer, basically.
Absolutely. And Gavin, where does the trusted technology and TCA certification fit into this new environment?
Well, building on Matt's answer just now, we're moving to systems of management to achieve safety outcomes for the industry. In days gone by, we may have written documentation and processes and procedures, and perhaps in some cases they sat on the bookshelf gathering dust. I think what the reforms that are being introduced now demand is the use of technology to deliver safety and productivity outcomes together. And when it comes to TCA's role, we set performance requirements around technology that not only does government ask for, but industry participants are asking for. So if you're going to rely on technology to help you achieve a safety management culture in your organisation, then you're relying on technology and data in ways that you haven't before. That means you need to ask certain questions about what the technology can do for you, and to understand any shortcomings or weaknesses. And TCA's role in this is to provide independent assessment around technologies so that those in the transport industry can make investment decisions with confidence. So one of the things we do is not just look at the technology, but we look at the business standing of the organisation that supports the technology. And just like we've done with WHG, yes, their technology is great, but we also know that they're a strong, viable business and their motivations are in the right place to service the industry, and they've got the on-ground support to meet the needs of the industry. So when you talk about assurance and technology and data, it goes well beyond just the digital realm. It goes to how service providers and technology providers can actually support the needs of the transport industry.
Yeah, so much interoperability. I can't say that word. But yeah, there's a lot in that space. So and from the operator perspective, Dylan, the operators have invested heavily in the technology over the past decade or more. What conversations are you having today with the fleets compared to, say, 5 years ago?
I think probably there's two parts to my answer. And I think building on what Matt and Gavin shared, there's absolutely there's a new awareness around how do we wrap around technology to help drive safer outcomes. And I suppose it's also part of that. If you look back, it's a complex realm that we all work in. We know that historically we have, the average age of a driver is a bit older, and attached to that there were things like impacts of sleep apnea, which influences fatigue. But again, historically, we didn't have ways to actually support the driver and introduced technology that actually, identified there were issues or changes needed. And I think that's what's exciting is now this next chapter, it starts to bring together those pieces. So from a tech perspective, it's things like adoption. How do you easily implement technology that's trusted, that is easy to deploy, that's also cost effective, and then also technology that's actually going to help supplement and drive those outcomes that now as an industry we're all working towards. So it's a really exciting time. But sometimes when you look backwards, the journey seems like it's taken a long time, but we're bringing together such complex parts, and we are absolutely leading globally with what we do here in Australia.
And just with that, with the technology that's coming in, there's a driver shortage. Do you think that the technology side of things can attract younger drivers into industry?
I absolutely think so. I think, if you look at in the past, we were doing electronic work diaries and manually written books, and there was nothing wrong with it at the time, but it's quite daunting to sit and keep a written record. Whereas now, with the youth of today, everything is digital. And I think that's what we're doing a good job as an industry, is now dragging the industry forward with new tools and new focus. So it's very exciting. So absolutely, I think it will influence new talent and making the job more accessible for more people, which is exciting.
Very exciting. So we're going to move on now to the second part of our podcast. So this is about getting more from the technology that you already have. So, following from this discussion, it's no longer, just needed for compliance reasons. And I think we've got a bit of a chicken and egg situation here, like as Gavin was speaking to. Did the rules come first or the technology in this new wave of reform? So I'm going to ask a general question to the panel, and feel free to jump in as you see. So most fleets have already got their telematics, a lot of them have EWDs and compliance systems in place. What are the biggest opportunities that operators might be missing?
I'll let you go.
I'm happy to have a stab at it. I think the most obvious one is just maximising that investment to connect systems. And I know historically there's always been some, and I'm not sure how to phrase this, but people have been quite protective over their patch of grass. But I think that the days of that are really behind us. In order to provide the best service, the best delivery experience, you have to, really work in partnership with other technology providers and then deliver the whole experience, So I think don't throw out the investment, do a bit of an audit and a sanity check on what you have, and then work it forward from there.
Yeah, I think as far as missed opportunities go, I think there's a big missed opportunity with how we utilize some of the data. What we see often is people utilize like fatigue data just in the instant that it happens to say, well, yes, this driver's now fatigued, we'll pull them over the road and everything's resolved. I think what that misses then is the big picture as well. How often does this happen? Does it happen to other people in the same place? Like maybe you've actually got a scheduling problem. Maybe you've got a route planning option problem or something like that. And actually trying to integrate that data back into the management of the business to then get the most value out of it. I think that's probably the biggest missed opportunity I see.
So it's holistic, and it goes into perhaps some of the cultural aspects of a business as well.
Definitely.
Yep. And I think Matt's absolutely right. With the move towards safety management systems, you're not just looking at individual incidents anymore. You're taking a sort of a macro view of your business, how it operates, and if there's one complaint or one concern or one constraint, perhaps that's communicated to me by people, is that they just don't know what to do with all the data that's being collected. And what I see happening in the transport sector is we've got organisations swimming in their own data, and they're just not equipped to be able to manage it well. And it strikes me that we're moving to this in 2026, we're moving to an environment where a new kind of skill set's needed in transport operations to actually take that broader look into the data, look at the trends and the patterns, and actually try and understand what that's telling you. Because the data shouldn't lie as long as it can be relied upon, and another plug for certified systems. But if you're going to rely on the data, do something useful with it and actually make meaningful change through your management systems. I think that's a real opportunity with the new HVNL that we're going to see being introduced. I think the industry's starting to look into this with a greater degree of rigour than they have in the past. And I think that's a real opportunity, both at a business level, but in terms of the public good and how the transport industry is perceived.
And if we take the lead from other transport industry as well, like aviation's had flight data and analytics programs in place for many years now, whereas I haven't seen that same kind of regulation in the heavy vehicle industry. So if we can spitball what's looking forward, like we've now got performance-based safety management systems, the next step is probably going to be integrating that data effectively in those systems.
And I think, the responsibility is of all the parties involved in actually helping translate that data so that it's easy to understand. Your focus as an operator is actually getting fully loaded trucks from point A to point B. And at the same time, it's, I suppose, working in partnership with people to help take responsibility for the area that they're specialists in, and to really translate the data into, real actionable outcomes. So it's not as complicated, I think, as some people believe it is when you start with the right questions.
Absolutely. And so what actually becomes possible when these systems start working together? And I'll open it to the group.
I've often said in other forums that the best ideas come from those who are closest to the coalface. I think there are endless opportunities to do more with existing technologies and emerging technologies. And like any disruptive technology, and I think we're seeing disruption in the transport industry with technology, it spawns new and creative ways of doing things. Three of us don't have the mental capacity to dream up everything. The point is, those who are closest to the operation of vehicles and fleets and drivers often come up with the best ideas. And I think what we've got to unleash are the opportunities that come from those who are closest to the day-to-day activities to come up with new ways of working. Some of the analytics and insights that Matt was talking about, some of the technologies and integrations that Dylan's talking about, the opportunities present themselves in different ways. The challenge for people like us is to make sure that we enable those opportunities to see the light of day and not to shut them down. And I think with a safety management culture that's being propagated through the new law, I think we're going to see more and more of that. And I think that's really exciting.
I think the benefit to that is twofold as well. One, we get the safety benefit, but I think what then flows on after we have safer operations is actually increased productivity as well. So it's a win-win for the business, and I think it's just effectively making use of the investment that these companies put into their technology to make sure they get the most value out of it.
I think that's absolutely the opportunity to increase productivity and the simple steps. If you run a certified onboard mass, depending on what technology you have better road access, you have access to carry additional load, and immediately that translates to bottom line impact for an operator. I can do more with less, I can cart more mass, so there's an immediate benefit. And then all the side that possibly we as industry don't see is the data that we generate helps investment and analysis on infrastructure, which again in a long-term view will come back around to a better outcome for the transport industry. So it's again it's there are challenges and there's investment required and there's complexities of understanding new things, but it's there is a real benefit there.
Yeah. And this is a really important point. And just to take that one step further, we've now got road agencies who are using the data that's being collected once it's been de-identified and aggregated, and it's being fed into business cases for investments and maintenance in our road infrastructure. So this isn't a theoretical concept anymore. This is actually happening. So road use is informing investment decisions, which then influences road use and so forth. It's a perpetual cycle. But the other thing I should mention is people have made investment decisions in good technology. Often it's been type approved by TCA or they've invested in a certified provider. They've done that not necessarily because they were chasing a productivity opportunity, which is available, but because they'd been burnt based on previous investments. Yeah. So, often their chief financial officer has said, don't make the same mistake again. Invest in the right kind of technology. But there are countless vehicles out there that I suspect with transport operations who aren't taking advantage of some of the opportunities right now, who could use the existing investments to benefit from those productivity gains that are on the table. And I'd remind those with those kinds of technologies, have a fresh look, because that latent capability in your vehicles could be offering real opportunities today in what is a challenging economic climate.
Yeah, and that actually brings me good segue into my next question for Dylan. I was going to ask about how the connecting systems actually helps operators reduce admin and improve visibility.
Well, I think absolutely, we've been sort of leading the charge in some areas, and the IoT space is one example. In the last 3 months, you're seeing a lot more IoT functionality being introduced in the industry, which is really positive. But what that fundamentally is you have an investment in a black box in your truck. Well, what other technologies can I connect with that device? So one of the most obvious things is temperature monitoring. So if you're carting protein, there's a very manual requirement to monitor temperatures, to log temperatures, but straight away that investment in your telematics device allows you to add on functionality that simplifies your auditing and compliance of protein. So I think there's a lot that can be unlocked, but it's about making the right informed decision up front. Set a foundation that you can grow off of, that helps you then, maximize the investment. And that's really, I think, the area that we've been playing in and doing a nice job of.
And to drill down a little, what does that integration look like in practice?
So simply, and again, I'm trying to be very practical with my answers, is are there APIs available? Fundamentally, is the data that's being generated in one system available in a facility or format that I can then centralize it into a data lake and then start to mine the data. So I think that's really important now moving forward, is having that awareness of saying there is a requirement for me to now build a whole safety system, and I need to start being able to monitor fit to drive. So when you look at the whole technology stack, you need to start pulling the pieces together.
Great. And Matt, from the regulator's perspective, where does visibility improve the safety outcomes?
I think it's really all about making sure that that data then feeds into your risk assessments to then identify which of your risk controls are working or not working, or where there might be some gaps in where you might need some additional risk controls. So mining that data, as Dylan said, is one of the best ways to do that, because it provides that objective kind of lens to try and figure out, well, what are we actually doing? Because often in risk management, people tend to go for the easy controls that they look for that says, oh, someone else is doing this, we'll do that as well, without actually understanding the nature of their operations and if that risk control is actually going to make a difference. So having all this data to sit behind that to say, well, actually, this control over here is actually cheaper, or we may already have the technology to do it. We just need to integrate it this way. And that just provides a much better, more effective outcome and a safer outcome as well. So I think that's where it really comes back to, is having that intelligence, well, not just data, but actually using data to generate intelligence to then better manage risk.
And I think it's spot on. You have a workflow where you do a pre-start vehicle inspection. If you don't ever take the driver's feedback from that pre-start inspection and flow it through to maintenance, you'll never be able to quickly and efficiently repair something that has a substantial, safety risk down the line. So often it's just about making those what should be obvious connections, to help improve the whole business operation.
Absolutely.
Turning some of that compliance data into proactive performance stuff.
Yeah.
And just thinking about from the operator's perspective, integrating this data, Dylan, are they going to have multiple dashboards, different systems? How do operators manage all these different systems?
I think ultimately you have to pick your platform of truth, so to speak, because you do need to generate a hierarchy. But in saying that, there's so much work that's gone into building over the years from a TCA perspective of defining a data dictionary on what type of parameters need to be generated and stored. If all the systems are talking the same language, so to speak, managing an asset is relatively easy, and I think that's, again, one of the most practical things. If you maintaining a driver listing in one system and obviously putting in place all the authentications and security that you would expect and need, but if you're managing drivers in one system and another system, you should be able to rather just do it in one location, and then it keeps that record updated. And again, that goes for vehicles, for trailers, for, there's a lot there that I think, when all the systems use a sort of centralized framework, it's easy to then integrate data.
And if you look at the new safety management system requirements, the very last section, section 5, is all about that systems being integrated into other business processes. So we've actually got something in the regular or the statutory instruments that reinforces exactly that concept of integrating all this data into your normal business system. So it's not a standalone thing that sits on the shelf. It's something you actually use all the time.
And I think that's what, I see as a really positive change is there's that now, there's the responsibility on the providers actually is brought to the front, because we have to help an operator take all the technology and actually bring it together and deliver it in a way that it genuinely works,